Hello, bonjour, namaste, ni hao, and ohio, everybody. What is going on? It is Gale here. Welcome back to the YouTube channel once again for another Danmachi Season 5 video. And today, we are here for the complete season review. As promised, I've watched the entire season over the last few days. I've binged watched it, and so we are here to talk about the entire season and rate it from the perspective of an anime only and as a light novel reader as well. I'm going to be talking about what I loved about this season, what I disliked about this season. I'm going to talk about what volume got the weakest adaptation, the best adaptation, which character came out smelling like roses, and which characters got done dirty. So stick around for this video, of course, and if you guys going to enjoy it, remember to leave a like down below, subscribe to the channel for more content, and let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. Maybe that can turn into a video in itself. And so you guys, please be sure to leave your comments. I'm curious to see what you guys have to say down below. I'll read through it potentially for a video. Now, first and foremost, I would like to reiterate that this is a completely subjective review. At the end of the day, everybody's going to have a very different opinion about how they feel about the season. I know there are some people who have given the season a 1 out of 10 for various reasons. I know some people who are giving this season a 7 or an 8 out of 10 for this season. And so, I feel like everybody's going to have a very different opinion. And so I would like to implore you guys in the comment section at least, or if you're sharing this video or whatever it is, don't be rude and don't be mean about it. I don't really care too much. You can be mean to me. That's all fine and well and good. I've dealt with a lot of bullshit in my life. But to other people especially as well, don't be rude to them. Let them have their opinion. If they feel that the season is bad, for whatever reason it is, they feel that way. That's completely fine. You can kind of converse about it. You can kind of understand their perspective, but don't be mean about it or don't be rude about it, saying that they're wrong or whatever it is. Because at the end of the day, it is all opinion based, right? It is all opinion based, and that's completely fine, to be honest, right? So first and foremost, let's talk about what I loved about this season. Having rewatched the entire season, I will say the early parts of the season with the twists and turns, with the mystery and the thriller aspect of it, right? With Seer, being Freya and stuff and all that being revealed for the very first time and everything, right? And how they handled, of course, the Freya Familia's intervention and, of course, how they started attacking everybody and everything. I think episodes 1 to 4 were super well done. I really do think that they absolutely knocked it out of the park with episodes 1 to 4. And to be quite honest, with that being said, I think outside of potentially needing a little bit more time and of course from issues from previous seasons, being pushed aside, of course, right? Remember at the start of the season, I complained a lot about, how because we missed out on a lot of volume 8 content in season 2, we unfortunately didn't get to see a lot of scenes in, the early episodes with like Belle and Seer, of course, with the orphanage and stuff like that. A lot of things that would kind of bring them closer together and bring their relationships to a higher level and to allow people to understand their relationship better. That all was missing, unfortunately, but I don't blame this season for it because it's a previous season issue kind of thing, right? But outside of that, right, episodes 1 to 4, absolutely fantastic. And I still maintain, coming out of the season, having binge watched the entire season, episode 4, in my opinion, is probably the best episode still, to be quite honest. Very few cuts. If anything, I don't remember even having to say that there were many cuts outside of maybe like a couple of lines and a couple of situations. I think for the most part, it was a very, very strong episode as a whole. The music as well that was involved at the end, especially, right, when the reveal was happening, of course, right? The way the reveal happened, I think was absolutely fantastic. And I think a lot of people will concur with me in that the first 4 episodes were probably the strongest, with the 4th episode being the best episode of the season. I know some people will argue about episode 12, of course, right? We'll come on to that later on. But I think episode 4, in my opinion, was fantastic. The voice acting, I mean, throughout the entire season, I will say this, the voice acting has never been an issue for me, to be honest. I think, Matsuoka-san with Belle, of course, especially as he was going downhill, with the Freya Familia and everything during the later episodes, right, in the mid part of the season. And, Hikasa-san with Freya, Ishigami-san with Seer, representing the duality and how well they were able to, contrast and also complement each other. That was really well done. The voice acting, in my opinion, was a straight 9 or 10 out of 10, to be quite honest, for this season. Honestly, it was amazing. And even the 9 out of 10, I would only give it 1 point less potentially, is because maybe the direction could have been better in some moments, but to be honest, it was so negligible, to be quite honest. It's very negligible, and honestly, for the most part, it was all fantastic. I don't think anybody can complain about the voice acting side of things for this season. I will say that was absolutely on point. But yeah, the first 4 episodes, very good. But I'd say it was really noticeable when, everything started to go a little bit roller coastery, in the sense of up down kind of thing, basically. And I would probably pinpoint episode 5 as the best point for you to notice that there is some issues going on, maybe behind the scenes or just generally with the adaptation. Because episode 5 really felt like we were just going fast, really fast, skipping over so much content. And I actually decided, right after the episode, I really wanted to go back and check my cut contents. And it was probably, I think, one of my longer cut contents, and it was also one of my more point heavy cut contents, in the sense I was going through a lot of points of what was cut, what was, skipped over, what changes they made and everything. And that was very noticeable, because you saw like certain characters missing, certain scenes missing. It was very much a case of like snap, move on to the next point, move on to the next point, move on to the next point. And I think that's where the issues started to really show up for this season. I feel, right, that my personal weakest episode is actually not episode 5 or episode 14 or episode 11 for that matter. I know a lot of people will say episode 11 is the weakest because, of course, it was what led to the delay of the season, which we'll come on to in a little bit actually as well. But I would say the weakest point, in my opinion, was episode 7 actually. Episode 7 was where we started to notice a lot of issues when it came to things like, the backstory side of things, and also just generally the way characters were explaining things in the story. I feel like that was when I started to realize and accept the fact that 15 episodes was just a no-fly zone. We'll talk about the 15 episodes issues a little bit later on, but I'm just gonna mention it here already that 15 episodes was just a bad idea from the get-go. I mean, I don't know whose decision it was. Was it, Warner Bros. And SB Creative were like, yeah, we need only 15 episodes. Can you do it? And JC staff, wholeheartedly accepted it because it's JC staff. I don't know. Is it the fault of them? Is it the fault of JC staff for saying yes? Is it the fault of Amori for letting things just run? I don't know. I don't really give a shit. It's a problem from the top that's been an issue here. From whichever point you look at it, the 15 episodes count was just a bad idea in itself, right? In terms of just the overall adaptation, while they were able to get it done, it was just a bad idea in itself. And that is what I dislike about the season, for one. But number two, like I said, is because of that being an issue, you also notice a lot of backstories and a lot of information being cut from characters. Episode 7 was the critical point because we skipped over Freya's backstory. It happened around that time in the light novel. There was an intermission and we got Freya's backstory around that time or a little bit earlier on. And also we missed out on Anya's backstory as well. And these things were so critical to the story because it obviously gave more of an indication to Freya as a character as well as Sierra as a character, and we just glossed over it. And this is again what happens later on as well in episode obviously 14 as well, right, with Hagni and Hayden, with the Gulliver brothers and everything, where in the light novel it was already a cut down version of what was in episode Freya. But it's also something that was written still in a very decent manner in the light novel, and so skipping over it was a big problem as well. And again, that was also what kind of didn't help Freya's character in any way, shape or form, because the whole idea was from volume 17 onwards with Freya is Amori wanted her to be the bad character, right, the bad guy of the volume, right? But we also saw at points, and the whole reason why they were trying to save her is because she had glimmers of the good side coming up. And while we did see it in the anime like once or twice, in the light novel it happened way more often, and we got a better understanding is what I should say here, a better understanding of the situation at hand. that didn't happen in the anime, and so everybody is obviously going to look at it as Frey as the bad guy through and throughout, and that's completely fine because that's how the anime wanted to portray it for the most part. Of course, at the end we see that she's good, she didn't want to be a goddess anymore, but we never got a full reasoning for that. There was no reasoning given, like, oh, at the end they say she doesn't want to be a goddess, but you didn't even ever show why she didn't want to be a goddess, right? There was a whole like 4 or 5 pages in the light novel that you just entirely skipped over. So what I dislike about the season is, in favor of progressing the story, they ignored the backstory, and that does not help because the backstory in these volumes, especially in volumes 16 to 18, all aid in, of course, making sure that the story progresses and it makes sense, right? That's the issue I have with this season, is that a lot of the backstory is ignored in favor of progressing the season, where it's not supposed to be the case at all. It's supposed to be that the backstory helped progress the season forward, not that removing it would help it anymore. No, that doesn't make any sense, right? That does not make any sense. So that's what I would say in that sense. That was one of the things I disliked about this season. The other thing I disliked about this season is, of course, the inconsistencies in the animation. I think that's pretty straightforward, and I don't think that can be disagreed on. I think the animation just had too many ups and downs, of course, right? Obviously, I'm really glad that obviously the final episode, and obviously we had episodes 12 and 13 to, really show us how good it can look. And then, of course, throughout the start of the season as well, I feel like when it came to at least the close-up shots and more still-based shots, right, not action-focused shots, they did a really good job there. But of course, there were some really bad episodes as well, like episode 11, of course, everybody will point out towards. Episode 14 was noticeably weaker compared to episodes 12 and 13, of course, right, even with the 3-week delay that we had, right? So you could tell that there were still issues nonetheless, and this was the first season in which I genuinely feel like they struggled, to be honest. I really do think they struggled production wise. And let's not get it twisted, JC Staff has never really delayed a season for Danmachi for any reason that wasn't an external reason. The only time they delayed a Danmachi season was season 3 at the very beginning, before the season even released. Because of COVID, they had to push it back, and they had to kind of, I don't know how they still managed to get that season to happen considering what I know, but yeah, I will say that this season was noticeably weak. It was noticeably weaker compared to previous seasons, at least from an animation front in terms of the consistencies, and that is a big concern for the future of the series as well. And I'll come on to that later on as well, because that's something, again, there's a lot of things we have to talk about in terms of the episode count, the animation and delays and so on and so forth. So I would say, yeah, the inconsistent animation is what I also disliked about the season. What I did like about the season, in terms of, at least when it came to the story side of things, is that, I'm not gonna lie, generally speaking, they did do a good job in portraying the story. Now, let me explain this, because it might be a bit weird when I complained about them not portraying it well at all in terms of the backstory side of things. When it came to the present timeline, when it came to the current timeline with stuff like Bell, with stuff like, Ryu and stuff, whatnot, right? I think they did a good job on that front when it came to how the characters were dealing with what the situation was with the situation at hand, how it was being dealt with. I think they did a good job there. A lot of my complaints when it comes to the season is more so on the backstory and, of course, certain characters, like 1 or 2 characters. But for the most part, when it comes to the cut contents and stuff like that, when it came to choosing what to cut, I think they've made the right decision. Now, I'm not saying that they should have cut a lot of this content, to be quite honest. I would have preferred if they didn't cut anything at all. But when it comes to these light novel content adaptations, right, especially you look at ReZero right now, for example, I've been seeing so many people complaining about ReZero's adaptation and the animation, and I'm like, look at us, how we are suffering, and it's the same thing with even other shows as well. Every light novel adaptations has its issues and has its problems, has its flaws, and has its cuts. I do think that when it comes to season 5 of Danmachi, when they've had to cut something, for the most part, I would say 80% of the time, they made the right decision and the story was told at least as whole as it could be told. Again, like I said, there are one or two things that I would have definitely preferred if they had kept in the season, such as, of course, Freya's backstory as well as Anya's backstory, right? For example. But for the most part, when it comes to generally speaking, the overarching aspects of the show, they did a good job. They did do a good job. I know people will disagree with me on this one, but I've literally read the light novel, and I will say that in terms of portraying everything for the season, for the most part, they did do a good job. Okay, so that's just my personal opinion. Now, I kind of want to also give a little bit of a mixed credit to the score and the OST of this season. It's not one of the strongest, to be quite honest. I will say that this season definitely isn't one of the strongest OST season or OSTs in Danmachi. To be honest, it didn't feature some of the newest OSTs or anything of that sort. It kind of relied on the old reliable for the most part. But there were times where I really enjoyed the music. There were some tracks that I really liked. Like I said, at the end of episode 4, when the reveal happened, the music that was played then was amazing. At the end of episode 15, when Belle is talking to Freya, I think that also was a really nice score as well. The paced up version of Hero's Desire was amazing as well, I think, for that time and for that section and how it related to the story. The music side, I think, didn't really revolutionize or, you know, bring something new to the table necessarily. But what they did do was give us a good score generally, nonetheless, you know, even if it is using some of the old reliable soundtracks and stuff like that from previous seasons or whatever, they still did a good job with what we got in the season as a whole. In terms of what music they decided to put into the season, that was great, in all honesty. I really do believe that. Now, I want to kind of talk about what volume I feel got the weakest adaptation as a light novel reader. I'm going to give you guys some of my own thought processes on that front, to be quite honest. Because obviously, as I said, I think volume 16 got by and far away the best adaptation. You could say volume 15 got the short end of the stick again, as like with volume 8, because it only adapted one scene from that volume, right? But I'm going to ignore that volume because, honestly speaking, it's like volume 8. It's unfair to judge it in any way, shape, or form because we never really got anything adapted from it apart from one specific scene, right? So it's not fair to put volume 15 in that list. I know a lot of people will probably come out saying volume 18 was the worst adaptation out of the lot, to be honest, because of the inconsistent animation, especially considering it's mainly action sequences. Some of the stuff that was cut, especially at the end of the season, episode 15 in particular, right? I still believe volume 17 got really gutted, to be quite honest. I still genuinely believe volume 17 was the most noticeable. The thing with volume 18, right? I think volume 18 would have been fine because it had episode 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. It had 6 episodes. You could argue and say maybe it needed one more episode, but what I would say it needed more than anything is, well, first and foremost, there was that one episode where we had the recap at the very beginning of the episode. Remove that recap and you get an extra like 5-10 minutes there and then itself. You also remove any openings and endings from any of the last 5-6 episodes, just like they did in the 15th episode, right? Extra 2 minutes right there. I think generally speaking, if they'd done that, you would have had a perfectly fine adaptation for volume 18 in my personal opinion. And also some changes here and there when it comes to, of course, certain characters' behaviors and what they're saying and stuff like that. But volume 17 had only 5 episodes. It had 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And it suffered big time. Episode 5, gutted. It was so gutted. Episode 7 had so many issues. Probably the weakest episode in my opinion of the season. I think volume 17 was probably the weakest adaptation and it needed an extra episode. A lot of it has to also do with just lack of, you know, the backstory side of things, the lack of backstory, the issues I had with cutting the scenes and stuff and ignoring certain characters' responses and behaviors and, you know, their whole response to the entire situation. I feel like that definitely hurt the season, to be quite honest. I really do think, especially it's the midpoint. It's when everybody's getting into the mystery side of things. The reveal has happened, you know, Belle's been taken by Freya. That is the point where you have to kind of like, put your cock down on the table and say, boo, you're looking for this kind of thing. Well, I don't know if we're necessarily looking for cocks, but you know what I mean, right? They're slamming their cock on the table and saying, this is what we're capable of doing. This is it, and make it a sort of like a little bit more, what's the word? A little bit more fearful, a little bit more terror based as well, because it felt like, it was inevitably going to be that Belle was going to be, rescued and stuff, of course, no doubt, but put more fear into us that he's not going to be able to get out of this. And while they did do a decent job, and I think it was the start of episode 8, of course, right, before Belle met Eyes, right, they did do a good job there. We needed more of that. It was what was happening in the light novel, so we needed more of that. We needed more of the indoctrination. We needed more of the gaslighting part of side of things, which we did get, but it was very far and few between. So I would say that was probably what I feel was the weakest point. Episodes 5 to 9 was definitely the weakest point of the season, in my personal opinion. So that's just my thought process on that. In terms of the character side of things, now I'm going to come on to the characters. I have to give credit where it's due. Hayden's character as a whole, voice acting side, the script writing side, generally what they did with him, fantastic. He is probably the best character to come out of the season as a whole in terms of what they did to him and everything. He is probably the best character to have survived the season, basically, in terms of he got everything. He got everything that he needed. Honestly, he's so well done. I think Hayden came out smelling like roses. Honestly, he was so good. He was so good this season. I think a lot of people are going to be big fans of him come the end of the season. Of course, if you've not watched it or you're done watching it, I'm pretty sure for you, Hayden's probably one of your favorites, no doubt. Ryu as well came out smelling like roses. I mean, it's no shocker there. We clearly know that there is something going on at JC Staff or Warner Bros. Creative or whoever it is when it comes to Ryu, but they love Ryu. Ryu's also come out smelling like roses in terms of the way she got her episode Ryu Familiar Chronicles scenes in this anime. The episode 12, just generally what they did with episode 12 and everything. And also just generally with the starting episodes as well, the fact that she was the only one to get a scene from volume 15 as well, right? So Ryu was definitely another one that came out smelling like roses for sure. Those are two characters that I definitely feel like came out smelling like roses. Now, of course, there might be some other characters that I could mention, but I want to name 2 and 2 basically. 2 characters that were done extremely well. 2 characters that I think were done a bit dirty. Character number 1 that was done dirty, Freya. Yeah, the main antagonist, one of the main characters of the series, of the season, I should say more specifically. Yeah, I do think she got done dirty. The lack of a backstory again for Freya, in my opinion, was the most critical point, and not to mention, removing the backstories from the Freya family members indirectly affected Freya negatively as well. Because again, like I said, we know she's a bad guy in this season. That's not a question, right? We understand that. But you have to give us the nuance and understanding of why these characters are trying to save her. Give us at least an understanding of, oh, there is a reason why she's behaving the way she is, and it doesn't feel like it was ever explained fully in the anime. As an anime only, I'd be like a little bit confused in a sense, to be honest. I'd understand it at the end of it, especially because she said it the way she said that I don't want to be a goddess anymore and anything, right? But why do you not want to be a goddess? That I feel was just ignored and never spoken of, in my opinion. And so in my opinion, Freya was done dirty for sure. This next character I felt didn't get done dirty until the very last episode, to be quite honest. And that is, of course, none other than Eyes Wallenstein. Now, I feel I've been saying it from the very beginning of the season, right? From episode 1, outside of the volume 15 cutscene, which again, like I said, yes, I do think that they needed to have that scene from volume 15 with Belle and Eyes. I would have ideally preferred if they had that scene with Belle and Eyes from volume 15, but knowing the episode count is only 15 and knowing that they only had a certain amount that they could put in, I definitely prefer and I accept and I agree with the decision they made to put the Belle and Ryu scene from volume 15 in this season because of Ryu's connection to Seer and Belle, and also Seer's starting point of her jealousy with Ryu as well, and her kickstarting the whole season off basically because of that, right? I do think that for this season, it was the right decision. For the overarching story, I agree. It is a bit of an error on their behalf to ignore that scene happened. But outside of that, from episode 1 onwards to episode 8 or 9, I'll say 9. Episodes 1 to 9, I had no issues with the way they did Eyes, because it was exactly the way it was in the light novels. I don't know why there's this obsession about Eyes doing certain things that are a little bit more than what the light novels actually made her do. In all honesty, I understand you want to see her in the best light possible, in a more emotional light as well, of course, right? Smiling and stuff. That's another thing that they could definitely improve on, no doubt about it. But when it came to her actions, her lines, and everything in between, I've read the light novel. I'm literally gonna tell you guys this. It was completely fine from episodes 1 to 9. Episode 10 onwards is where issues started to pop up for me, and I think for a lot of other people. Especially with episode 10, right? I knew this was going to be an issue going into the season because we never got Sword Otoria. But episode 10, with Eyes not being allowed to help or participate in the war games at all. She wasn't allowed to help with training Bell, and she wasn't allowed to participate, of course. We know that. We know why the participation part was a thing, because of Finn's, whole deal with the guild and Royman. But obviously we didn't know why she wasn't allowed to help Belle outside of a favor to Otarl. Why does Eyes have a favor to Otarl? Unless you read the light novels, nobody would know. Unless you read the light novels, nobody would know. And so that is another issue I have with this season, is again the lack of connection, and the lack of Sword Otoria definitely affects this in some way, shape, or form. And it is going to be even more come the next couple of seasons, of course, right? But alas, either way, that was point number 1. And then, of course, generally speaking, how she was watching the war games, the lack of emotion, the lack of movement from her. And I wouldn't apply only this to Eyes. Of course, Eyes, I think, was the biggest issue nonetheless, of course, right? But I would also apply this to other characters like Aina, and even the other Loki family members as well, to an extent. They also never really had a full reaction. The crowd side during the war games was definitely a lot weaker than what it was in the light novel. And so definitely that is something where I think they struggled a lot with, or they just decided to ignore it. I don't know what the reason is. But Eyes definitely got hurt by it a lot as well, because she was, scratching her arms, bleeding out a bit as well. She was cheering and screeching for, Belle to win. So was the other rest of the Loki family members and stuff. That being cut is a bit wrong, in my personal opinion. Again, I do think that those last 5 episodes were definitely a little bit like where I was like, okay, maybe they do have a bias against Eyes a little bit. But I still maintain my point, and I still stand by my point that episodes 1 to 9, fine. Episodes 10 onwards, definitely dirty. Definitely done very, very dirty, in my opinion. But yeah, now I kind of want to wrap this video up a little bit by talking about the season before I give my rating, in terms of the episodes count and, just generally as well, the issues we've had with the production and stuff. Like I said at the start of this video, or some point in the middle of this video, I don't remember when I said it now. It's only been 10 minutes, but listen, I'm rambling a little bit here, to be honest. I am rambling a bit. But I will reiterate my point and say I don't know whose fault this season was. It's a good season in my opinion still. I'll tell you guys already right now, I still think it's a good season. But coming off of the back of season 4, right? Coming off the back of season 4, is it because Danmimo is no longer funding these productions, no longer allowing them to have the budget to fund these productions? I don't know. I don't know what the reason is. I don't know what the situation is. I have no idea whose decision it was to do 15 episodes. I have no idea whose decision, because the thing is, right, first and foremost, 15 episodes, why? First and foremost. Second of all, this, I don't know who to blame here more. I'd blame more Warner Bros here, Loki, is how JC staff are. You know how they operate. Giving them a deadline and telling them to do this project in a certain amount of time, and effectively making them have to do the project during a season in which they have already other 4 or 5 shows. Like, come on. You look at what's happening with Railgun, for example, and how it's going to be coming out in a completely empty period, most likely. And JC staff's doing it. Of course, they're going to do really well. And the thing is, right, a lot of people will say like, oh, this is classic JC stuff, what were you expecting, anything different? But I'm like, no, because we've seen them do well. It's not been that long since they did like season 4. It's only been 2 or 3 years, and it's like they did extremely well then. How hard is it for them to do it again? And I think they could have done it again as well if you were to have given them the time, the budget, and also just generally the right deadline. And the episode count, of course. The episode count, of course, would help so much, of course, right? You give them an extra 5 or 7 episodes, they're able to spread out the content a lot better. They're able to spread out the workload a lot better as well. They're able to devote more time to the slower episodes so that they have more time to work on the action episodes coming out in, later parts of the season. It would help so much, right? That being said, though, I will say there is also a blame on JC staff a little, for sure, no doubt, on making some of the wrong decisions towards the end of the season, right? With, like I said, with the eye scene, with Charles kneeling down scene, of course, right? Where, he was supposed to say that he's only giving Belle 5 minutes. Stuff like that, I feel like they've also made mistakes, no doubt, throughout the entire season here and there as well. But they did the best they could, in my opinion, for 15 episodes, at least when it came to the first 9 or 10 episodes, to be honest, right? Again, I think we can have a debate about, oh, did they make the right decision, wrong decision? Again, it'll be a little bit subjective on that part. But I do feel like, especially in the last 5 episodes, you could tell that they were starting to struggle, right? And that's the reason why we had the delay in the first place and whatnot, right? JC stuff, I'm not gonna absolve them of any fault here at all. I'm not gonna get rid of their faults in any way, shape, or form. They are at fault as well for some of the decisions they made, and for letting it run without telling them, maybe we can't do this, maybe we need to give more time, giving the respect to the season. Because at the end of the day, it's also understandable that they're getting money for this, they're getting a deadline, they want to keep the project under their control, but they also should have had the balls and the voice to say, no, this is not possible for us, we need more time, you're gonna have to delay the season or something. They should have done that, at least. They should have definitely done that, at least. I also have to blame the higher-ups with the production committee side of things, Warner Bros, SB Creative, whoever it is, for letting this shit run and for giving them such a minimal deadline. Basically, we only got the announcement of season 5, remember, in November 2023, and the season was supposed to drop in October 2024. It's like, usually for every season we've had a year and a half, 2 years in advance of basically an announcement. So it's one of those things again where it's like, well, why what was the issue this time around? What was the big problem this time around? I don't know. Again, I have no idea what it is. Is it budget issues, time issues, JC staff issues? Because again, I can see it being sort of budget, because you have to remember that we're in an era now where Danmachi is not making them as much money as it used to. Danmachi was making them like a lot of money a year, man. It was making them like easily like 4 or 5 million a year for them back in the day. I'm talking about. I'm not talking about like in its last couple of years, but like during the 3rd and 4th anniversaries, it was making them money. It was making them huge money. And we're now in an era where Danmachi is barely making them money. Full End of Water and Light has just released. There's not much on that front as well, right? And in terms of light novels as well, I mean, yes, we did have a plethora of light novels dropping last year, right? From, those 13 light novels in a row. Of course, no doubt, that's also going to help a little bit in terms of revenue side of things, right? But like, I don't know what it is. I don't know what's the issue, but are they struggling with money? Is it a money problem? They got to release more merchandise is what I say then, or something. They got to figure out something, but yeah, I don't know if it's that. Is it time issues? Did they want it to come out now? I don't think it should have. I think the best thing they could have done, to be honest, and what would have made sense, is release it for the 10th anniversary of the anime. Why not release it at the end of this month? At the end of March, start of April, they could have done season 5, start season 5, and that would have been your 10th anniversary. And you could have still had another project for the 10th anniversary, which we'll obviously find out on the 4th of April, whatever that project is. That could have been announced right after the season ended, saying like, oh, one more bonus thing for this project, and boom, that would have been amazing to have as well, But I don't know what the issue is on that front, or what the situation is. Like I said, I'm gonna blame everybody. I'm not gonna just blame one party here, because I just don't see it only being a JC staff problem, because it's not them deciding the episode count. It's not them wanting and saying like, oh, we want only 15 episodes. No, there's a lot more at work here. There's a lot more problems here. I think it's a combination of a lot of various factors. It feels like everybody's out for Danmachi to just basically not have an anime anymore, which is a damn shame, because again, I will say this as well, is that we should also be kind of glad that we are getting a Danmachi anime. There are so many shows that I know that have been only adapted for one season, and then the rest are just, they don't exist. There's no other season after that, or they get a season after like 10 years or something. So we should be glad that we are getting Danmachi content regularly and stuff like that. But obviously now it's a question of, we need it to be good content though. We need it to be good, and that is where the problem lies right now. But anyways, let me give you guys my final thoughts on season 5. Overall, like I said, I think the season was good. As an anime only, I'd personally rate it a 7 or 8 out of 10 for sure. I think it was a very solid season. I really enjoyed it. If I was just turning my brain off and not focusing on the light novel content side of things, I enjoyed the season. I had my issues with the season for sure, nonetheless, at certain points, certain scenes and stuff, right? But the voice acting, the characters, the storyline, everything was super good in that sense. But when I do factor in my light novel side and my Ellen reader side, I have to give this season a 5 or a 6 out of 10, to be quite honest. I'd say more so a 6 out of 10, to be a little bit more of a 6 out of 10. I think the first 4 episodes were fantastic. They were extremely well done. And then, of course, it started to drop off a little bit in episodes 5 to 9. I think episodes 5 to 9 was where I was a lot more concerned. But there were some scenes that were really well done, and then there were some scenes that were really questionable. And then that carried forward into the War Games arc as well. So overall, I would say it was a solid season as a light novel reader, at least for the first four episodes. And then it became a bit of a roller coaster ride. And then it was like, okay, how are we going to end? Are we going to end on like an exhilarated motion, or am I going to be sick come the end of the season? I would say I came out of it feeling very like flat, effectively is the best way to put it, when it comes to the end of the season. I came out feeling not completely exhilarated, but not entirely sick. You know, I'm not feeling like really rough after the roller coaster ride, but I'm not feeling like, you know what, let's go kind of thing at the end of the season. It's just, it was a roller coaster ride. That's how it is, you know, just an average roller coaster ride. But anyways, let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below regarding the season as a whole. What did you guys think? Thank you guys so much for watching. Obviously, all the content on the channel. I'm still going to be doing a lot more Danmachi stuff over the next couple of weeks. Of course, we know that the announcement is happening on the 4th of April. We will be there, of course, for that. But in the meantime, of course, be sure to enjoy the rest of the content that's going to be on the channel. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you guys next time. Ciao, everybody. Bye-bye.